The election should be decided within the next 2 weeks. Keep it here on Channel 5. We will keep you up to date, where our news is always live, local, and late-breaking. And now let's go to the weather with Chip Chipperson. Chip, please tell us you've got some good news for us.
We do have some good news, Hank. We have a jet stream that's reached all the way up to Canada, and it's pushed its way all the way back to us, which means we have some great weather over the next few days. It's going to be wonderful. I've got some other good news for you too, Hank.
Oh, what's that?
The good news of the gospel. Want to come to church with me?
Well, that is always good to get good news, and that weather is fantastic news. Thank you, Chip.
Hank, you're avoiding the subject. What do you have to lose besides your pagan lifestyle?
In our next story, it seems that a local man has found a litter of puppies and is looking for a home for them.
It's time for you to come on home too, Hank. Home to the house of the Lord.
Well, that was awkward. Why is talking about Jesus such an awkward thing? And if you're here, you're like, hey, I'm not a real church person. I'm not a follower of Jesus yet. And it is awkward. Or you've been coming to church your whole life and you're like, I just I don't know what to say, how to say it. My name's Kyle. I work here at Real Life. Real Life exists, like Sarah told us earlier, to help people who are far from God, or if you feel far from God, to help find real life in Jesus and Christ. So that's what we're trying to do. You are the beneficiaries of being the group of people that gets to hear the very last sermon in the longest series in real life's history. This is the Superfans series, and we don't go usually more than 4 or 5 weeks, and this is week 7. So it's probably the best of them since it's the 7th one. But this is where we've been. If you haven't been here, let me catch you up a little bit. I'm a super fan of lots of things, starting with sports. And if you've known me for any length of time, whether you knew me when I was in 2nd grade or till now, these are my teams. I will talk about them anytime, any place. Even like the Reds are really bad, but I'll talk about them, and pretty soon I'll turn you to the 70s when Pete Rose and Bobby Bench and those guys played when they were winning World Series. You want to talk about the 76ers? I'll talk about them. Pretty soon I'll move you back to when Julius Erving, Dr. J came to be on the team, and that was a much better time for me in my life. And if you want to talk about the Dolphins, the greatest team in NFL history, right? We know that. If we've learned anything from this series, we've learned that the 72 Dolphins are the greatest team in NFL history because they never lost. That's right. So that makes them the best team ever. And the Boise State Broncos, listen, I like the Seahawks too, but I didn't have room for a fifth logo. But anyone watch the Seahawks last night? Yeah, George Chelan got in the game at running back like in the 2nd quarter and played quite a bit and scored again. George Chelan played for Boise State last year. He's a rookie, and he's going to make the Seahawks team. Now, listen, you're like, lighten up, Francis. We get it. No, I could talk about it all the time because I'm a super fan of Boise State and George Chelan, even though the running back we got now at Boise State, Ashton Jeanty, is better than George Chelan. You're going to find that out in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. You're going to say, Kyle, you're right. Ashton Jeanty is the best running back in the United States. I can talk about that forever. Also, I am a super fan of Jesus. I know that's a harsh transition, but I love talking about Jesus. Maybe not as easily or as readily as talking about sports, but I'm a super fan. So when you're a super fan of something, you talk about it. And as followers of Jesus, I know we're all at different places this morning. We're not all the same place. I know that. In our journey of faith, I know that. But the fact is, some of us who aren't yet followers of Jesus or who bump into other Christians, we're like, why do you guys always have to talk about Jesus? Just everyone's on their own path. Leave me alone. You do you, I'll do me. Because here's the reason. We've discovered a wonderful thing. And it's changed our life. And we want other people to know. Now, I know that every Christian you've run into doesn't come across that way. Sometimes it's just they're trying to win an argument. Other times they're just you feel like they're trying to recruit you to some kind of number or just get you to their church. I'm telling you, real people who love Jesus in a real way, we just want other people, especially people we care about, to know what it is to experience real life in Jesus. So, this morning I just want to, I'm going to take one thing off your plate. We know in this series that invitation is key. That people show up to church, awkwardly with an invite sometimes, but people show up to a relationship with Jesus because someone along the way said, hey, you should come to my church. Or, hey, have you ever considered the truth about who Jesus is? Or, I've discovered Jesus, can I talk to you about that? Almost all of us ended up here or ended up somewhere in faith because somebody invited us. Here at Real Life, we call that process invest and invite. We want to invest in people, not as some project, not to gain points, but we just have discovered something we want to share, and then we want to invite them to real life, but to a relationship with Jesus as well. Now, over the last few weeks, we've talked about those roadblocks that keep us from doing that. There's these invitation roadblocks, like what keeps you, if you're a follower of Jesus, what keeps you from talking about Jesus with people you care about? First of all, it's frustration. We think we have to win some kind of argument, that we have to try to convince somebody to believe the way we do. We have to lay out enough truth in the right, passionate way, and then people are just going to respond. But the fact is, the invite of Jesus from the very beginning was just come and see. He didn't try to convince anybody. The original posse that hung out with him as he recruited them, he just said, come on, follow me and watch what happens. Wasn't trying to win an argument. There's no frustration. We weren't trying, because the goal was not to explain something, but to experience someone. And of course, there's information to be explained and stuff to be shared. But in reality, we get so caught up in trying to convince people that we miss out on the opportunity of just inviting people just to experience Jesus. The other thing, someone on the line, and I'm guilty of this, is we go into this hiding and huddling thing. Where, statistics, I'm probably making this up, like once you've been a believer, a follower of Jesus for about 7 years, all of a sudden you look around, you don't have any other friends who aren't Christians. Like all of a sudden, what you used to be and who you used to hang out with, now you're this church person or a follower of Jesus, and now you don't know anybody. So that to share Jesus with somebody in your circle, you don't have anybody that doesn't know Jesus in your circle. So I don't know when that started, probably somewhere in the 50s and 60s. We just kind of all started huddling up. We're protecting us, protecting our kids, protecting our neighbors. We're protecting everybody. Matt, is that me? I apologize. I put on a few pounds the last couple of weeks, so I think my shirt's tighter and it's hurting my microphone. How do I sound? How do I look? One more roadblock. The other thing is ignorance and busyness. And don't be offended. You're going to be offended sometime today. We'll talk about that in just a second. But don't be offended by that. Ignorance doesn't mean you're stupid. Ignorance just, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. It's okay. Like, I just don't know. Or we get so busy, and you're busy doing really cool stuff, you guys. I get it. Your job, your family, your kids, I get it. That's all good stuff. But the fact is, if you're so busy, you can't slow down to look around and say, hey, can I tell you a little about Jesus? Or, hey, come to my church. That's where the invitation starts. So, this morning, in about the next 30 minutes we have together, I want to take one major objection off your plate. If you showed up this morning or you're tuning in, if you're tuning in from Brewster, I'm sorry, you're sitting there all by yourself in the middle school gymnasium, and it probably smells like fumes because they just redid the floors. But if you're tuning in or you're here in Chelan and you're not yet a follower of Jesus, this argument that you have, this thing, I want to remove for you. Now, at some point, we're going to disagree, whether you're a regular church person or not. And it's okay. All right? We don't have to live in the society that all around us that says, if you disagree with me, you're my enemy. I like this, well, I like this. Okay, well, you go to hell. You know what I'm saying? I mean, go to Facebook. Start talking politics. Start talking sports. We live in the society where, like, if we disagree, we're enemies. And that's not true. We can disagree. And listen, when we get done, if you disagree with me, we'll still be friends. I'll still hang out with you. Yeah, you've never hung out with me. I'll hang out with you. All right? This isn't a relational thing. Okay? This is a truth thing, hopefully. Because this objection, we usually look at it, and emotion becomes the argument. And we have learned that doesn't work. When you get all fired up and you are reasoning by your emotion, you're limiting yourself from new information and new truth. Like when we talk about Jesus, and you're like, I don't know about this stuff. I don't know about God and dying on the cross and all that stuff. Like, it makes me feel weird. All right. You might have an emotional resistance to that, and I get that. If it's new to you, I get that. But I don't want to, it's not my goal in the next now 25 minutes to prove historical Christianity. To take everything you've ever had questions about within Christianity, that's not my job. I just want to take this one thing, this one major objection, and it's this. Jesus' claims seem exclusive, unique, and narrow. Roughly put, who says you Christians have it right? Who says you're the only way to live? Who do you think you are when you say that Jesus is the only way to heaven, that Jesus is the only way to God? It just seems different. Couple things. I'm going to move quickly through this, and we can talk later if you want. But when we think about, Jesus is the only way to get to heaven, or Jesus is the only way to have faith, it seems so exclusive to all the other religions. So it seems, the way we count it, it seems unfair. Right? And so we have this emotional resistance to the truth. It's unfair as we measure unfairness. But it's also incredibly uncomfortable. Because somewhere along the line, we start talking about sin. No one likes that. And we talk about, hey, listen, unless you believe in Jesus, because Jesus came to die for your sins. Or sometimes it comes across, if you get yourself in a really judgmental church, it's like, hey, you put Jesus on the cross. You killed Jesus. You made him die. And it seems, and of course it seems, super uncomfortable. Like, why? That doesn't make sense. And there's this cross, and there's blood, and there's death, and it's like, So it seems unfair that it's so exclusive, and it's so uncomfortable to talk about sin and death and Jesus. But here's my point. That doesn't mean it's untrue. It may seem unfair, and it may make you uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it's untrue. Unfair plus uncomfortable doesn't equal untrue. Now, let me give you the best example I can give you. Look at this guy. That's a good-looking guy. That's Pastor Kyle when he was about 21. Oh, yeah. Let's just point out all the cool things about Pastor Kyle. Starting with what? What do you notice first? Oh, man, look at that. And it's feathered, just like Farrah Fawcett taught us in the 70s. It's feathered. And that was at a time where I wasn't even having to piece it into place to make it look good, all right? That would, by a few months from now, I'll be doing that at my wedding. But for then, look at that rugged, shirt my mom bought me, all right? And I believe I got my white jeans on also, all right? Come on. Yeah. I don't know if that's what's true, but at least in Boise, all the women wanted to be with me and all the men wanted to be me. So that's what my bumper sticker said. That's a good-looking fellow. That's what Darlene married. She was so excited. On her wedding day, she came running and leaping down. She couldn't wait to be married to me. But look at this guy. What happened? He can't see, he can't shave, that was me doing my own selfie. You can see me on funkybutchunky.com. I have my own. Come on. That's unfair. If you're Darlene, come on. Remove my fantastic personality from this equation. That is unfair. You got to wake up next to that other guy? That's uncomfortable. Listen, I'll make it worse. Do you know throughout my marriage, I've been married 39 years. Thanks. It's a lot of hard work. Do you know that throughout my marriage, there'll be times where she'll be like playing solitaire, and I'll just walk by and I'll just scoop the cards on the floor. Or we'll just be sitting there and I'll just poke her. Or she'll be like watching The View. She's an avid viewer of The View. She loves The View. She doesn't. And I'll just walk by and on top of her head, I'll go. That is uncomfortable. Like, these things come into my mind like, why? I'm not being mean. I think I just lack attention. Listen, if you're Darlene, that is an unfair deal. If you've been married to me for 39 years, it's been super uncomfortable. But no one would say, so that means you're not married. Right? It's still true we're married. It's been unfair and uncomfortable for her, but we're still married. The emotion of an argument sometimes gets in the way of truth that we not just need to know. It could affect us in this life and in the one to come. When we talk about stuff like this, we think, okay, if there's a perfect God like you Christians talk about, then he should have a perfect system. But in that, we think, okay, perfect, like I consider perfect. But in this process, and just give me 2 minutes here. In this process of how do you get to God? How do you make yourself right? How is it you find your way to heaven? In that process and then this discussion, oftentimes we underestimate sin and brokenness. We want to look at our sin and say, it's not so bad. Because when I look at your sin, or your sin, your evilness, listen, it's like when something happens to my car and I get out and I look under the hood. I don't know what I'm looking at. You didn't do anything. Oh. No. Unfair and uncomfortable, you're fired. Thank you, Matthew. Listen, we underestimate, because I look at my sin and I think, okay, my sin's bad. But it's not as bad as your sin. I wasn't pointing out any of you. Wait, yes I am. It's not as bad as these guys down here. You middle schoolers, I don't sin as much as you guys do. Who else? No, Krista, you never sin. Listen, we think, there should be an easier system. But in that system, we hold down sin, or we we water down sin. We don't even call sin sin. And sin's a big deal to God. I wish it wasn't. A holy, perfect, righteous God. In almost every system when we talk about religion, somebody's got to pay for that sin. Someone's got to pay for the wrongness. And so we don't even call it sin. Within the church and our communities, we've got to the point, what do we call it? We don't call it sin. We call it what? That's right, a mistake. Like, oops. Mistake is like I added 2 numbers wrong when I was balancing my checkbook. That's a mistake. What do you call a mistake that you plan out ahead of time? What do you call a mistake that you think through and you go through anyway and you know it's going to hurt you and people you love? Hey, we don't have to look around the world very far to find out there is brokenness and depravity and sin. I run into it every day, sometimes in my own life, sometimes in the life of you all and other people in our community. I'll come home and I'll say to Darlene, I'm not surprised anymore by the depravity of people, what people are capable of doing and saying to other people. We're messed up. And the fact is, we think, okay, wait, maybe I'm not as bad, because the Old Testament, I follow the 10 Commandments. Well, the 10 Commandments, one of the 10 Commandments is don't commit adultery. All right? Middle school boys, if you don't know what that is, ask your folks or Pastor Grant. Then you get to the New Testament, Jesus comes along and says, hey, I'm saying adultery, schmultery. If you've even thinking sexy thoughts about another woman, that's just like committing adultery. And everybody listened to Jesus went, especially the men went, look, we're doomed. And Jesus says, yeah, but I showed up for the doomed people. You're not all alone. You may feel doomed, but you ain't doomed. So we think we want fairness, and fairness is really the last thing that we really want. Because fairness is, you do the crime, you do the time. You messed up, you got to pay. Fair really, when it comes to God, we're not even close to wanting fairness. God has a standard, right? Way more than the 10 Commandments. And we're like, I'm never keeping that standard. But like we say all the time, you have a standard for your life, right? Of right and wrong. But you don't even keep your own standard. And I'm not judging you. I have a standard too. I don't keep it. So what happens? What's the solution? What do we do? And thank God he didn't leave us in the midst of our brokenness, in our sin, in our mistakenness. And he provides an unfair and uncomfortable solution. This guy Paul, who writes 2/3 of the New Testament, and what he did was he went around as a missionary and he would establish churches, and then he would write letters back to them, and they contained all kinds of truth, theology, stuff about God, stuff about Jesus. Paul became best friends with all the eyewitnesses and the people that hung out with Jesus. And so he developed the teachings about Jesus. He took the teachings of Jesus and applied them to everyday life. So Paul shows up, and in this book he wrote to this church that was in Rome, he lays out some deep, deep stuff. And he lays out this unfair and uncomfortable solution, how we don't have to feel doomed. We're not all by ourselves. There's an answer, and it's not fair, but the unfairness doesn't hit us, it hits God himself. Paul says this, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless. And powerless means when we were trying to fix ourselves. Every faith system has a set of rules, right? Every faith system says you got to do this, you got to do this. You can't go there, you can't go that, you can't see them, you can't do that, you got to show up here. When we were trying to fix ourselves, when you were like, I'm just going to try to be good enough, I'm going to try. When we were powerless to meet the standard of God, at just the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not ungodly. I'm not that bad. And all Paul is saying is like, you're powerless to fix yourself because you're unlike God. God's God, you're not. It doesn't make you evil, it doesn't make you bad, it doesn't mean you don't pay your taxes, it doesn't make you not a good parent. It just means you're not like God. He keeps going. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. Like, there's people, quality people that might give up their life, like law enforcement, military. You would do something to protect maybe your spouse and your kids. Once in a while, that shows up. But then, this is the whole morning. If you've been sleeping or whatever, that's okay. Wake up now and listen to this 90 seconds. Because Paul said, in the midst of your sin, in the midst of your questioning, in the midst of like, I don't know what to do or how to do this, I don't understand it. Paul says, but God. In contrast to those who live good lives and just trying to be the best they can, but God demonstrates his own love. It's such a different, radically different kind of love than we know. In this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That is an unfair and uncomfortable solution. That we as the sinners, we as the mistakers, we as ones who gave God the middle finger by the way we acted and thought and treated other people, because of God's love, and he proves it when he sends Jesus to die to pay the price on our behalf. You guys, God went way beyond fair. Unfair was how Jesus was treated. You're like, oh man, I don't get all this. Oh, that's all right, that's all right. But the truth of the scriptures is that there was this gap between us and God. And God said, we're not doing that. That ain't good. Get down there, Jesus, and take care of it. It's not fair. Fair is I pay. Fair is immediately when I sin, immediately when I do wrong, immediately when I make a planned mistake, I pay. That's fair. God goes way beyond fair. As we turn from home, let me give you just a couple quick things. God offers a just system. It's the most just system possible, and it's this. Everyone is welcome. Everybody is welcome into this system. Everybody is welcome into a relationship with God through Jesus. Everybody. No matter your age, no matter your race, no matter your financial status, no matter where you grew up, no matter where you go to church, no matter if you go to church or not. Everybody's welcome. You're like, that's not fair. No, it's not fair. Because we think you have to earn it. You have to clean up your act and then God will love you. You have to do certain things and you have to stop doing certain things and then you get a chance. Or if I just do enough good things and less bad things, then when I die, I hope I get in. That's not the system of God. The system of God is Jesus makes you right. Jesus makes you sinless. Jesus makes you innocent. Not because you never sin, but the penalty is taken away by Jesus. And everybody, you all are welcome. And everybody gets in the same way. Jesus. You don't have to give extra money in the offering. You don't have to stop going to movies. You don't have to only be married once. You don't have to not watch Netflix. Everybody gets in the same requirement is faith. You're like, oh, that's my problem. I don't have enough faith. And we ask this question all the time here. How much faith does it take for you to follow Jesus? As much as you got right now as you sit here. As much as you got right now as you're tuned in. That's enough. Because the responsibility and the weight is on Jesus, not on you. It's not on how much faith you have, but who your faith is in. So, let me give you 3 quick next steps and we're done. Every week we have next steps. And they're on the blue card. The blue card's super important to us here at Real Life. If you have a prayer request, if you have a question, you can even sign up for stuff. Really important. But on there are the next steps as well. So let me give you 3. And maybe one of these you can take and say, listen, because of what I heard today, now I'm going to take an action step based on one of these 3. First of all, number 1, choose truth over emotion. If you don't agree with what I've said here today, all right. But why? And maybe it sends you into your own investigation of the truth. There was a historical Jesus. He actually lived on the earth, and we know, it's not all made up. And you're like, hey, how do you know somebody didn't write the whole Bible? Well, we know that there was 40 different authors over 1,600 years, and there's all different types and came from different places. I mean, you can go to your own research and say, wait a minute, maybe I've had some emotional responses to stuff about God instead of researching the truth behind it. And remember, there's lots of stuff that can that seem unfair and make you feel uncomfortable. Doesn't mean they're not true. 2, don't add to the untrue, uncomfortable debate. If you're not yet a follower of Jesus, take a break for 60 seconds. Because I'm only talking to people who call themselves Christians, followers of Jesus right now. It's not your job to make people feel uncomfortable. It's not your job to treat people unfairly. It's not your job to convict people of sin. You're in no position to judge whatsoever. You're like, wait a minute, I know the truth. Okay. Your calling is to live out the love of Jesus to people you know. You can speak your truth. You can do that in a loving way. You can share your story. But as soon as you decide to jump on Facebook or X or Instagram or the dirty ones, Snapchat and TikTok, and you start blasting people, and you're just delivering truth in the name of Jesus. No, you're not. You're doing the exact opposite of what you think you're doing. You're repelling people from faith in Jesus instead of attracting them. No place in Scripture where Christians are called to judge non-Christians. Don't make it worse and give people who are struggling to find a path to Jesus another emotional reason to reject him. You show up and live love of Jesus, watch what happens. Finally, listen, if you're here today, what a jerk I would be if I didn't give you the opportunity to choose to put your faith in Jesus. I'm a super fan of Jesus. You're like, you have to be at your job. All right. I was a super fan of Jesus before I got this job. Well, didn't you work for a church before? Yeah, well, I was a super fan of Jesus before I got that church job. Well, didn't you go to Christian college? I was a super fan of Jesus before I went to Christian college. Didn't you go to Christian high school? I was a super fan of Jesus before I went to Christian high school. What about Christian middle school? Nope, not a super fan of Jesus. When I met Jesus in a real relationship way, when I was a 9th grader in high school, it changed my life. It made my life better. It made me better at life. It didn't make me better than you. It just made my life better. In the midst of brokenness, in disappointment, in grief, in pain. I'm a super fan of Jesus because of the hope that he provides every single day. I'm a super fan of Jesus because I know when I take my last breath, my next one will be in the presence of Jesus. I'm a super fan of Jesus, so I would love you to get to know and give your life to Jesus as well. Despite all your muck and mess in the past or present, that you would say, listen, I don't know what to do with my stuff that keeps me at a distance from God. I don't know what to do with the stuff I don't understand. And Jesus comes along and says, I do. I would encourage you, you can make that decision right where you're sitting at home in your pajamas, or sitting right here, or tomorrow morning when you wake up, that you say, God, I understand I'm full of brokenness and sin and mistakenness. And I need a rescuer. And God, I put my faith, I trust my life to Jesus, the only answer. And I know that seems narrow, and I know that seems exclusive, but the invitation is to everybody, very inclusive.